Hey, welcome to D-Lab. On the bench today, I've got a really nice Gibson EH150. Came to the shop with complaints of strange noises. Let's see what it is. So before we check it out, I'll give you a little guided tour. Let you see how beautiful this Gibson is. It's in excellent condition. This unit comes to me from a fellow in Wyoming. I repaired a EH125 for him a few months ago. So there's the rear cover. Front looks great. Let's flip it around. Look at the back. Here it is backside. It's got that beautiful wrinkle finished black chassis. It all looks pretty much original. I did notice that tube socket right there looks to have been replaced. But everything looks clean, and it's got the original speaker with the ID plate down there. So for the initial power up, as you know, I always use a variac. So we're going to bring it up slow, watch that current, and listen to the amp. So I'll flip the attention to the amplifier, we'll kill the shop lights, and hope we don't get a fireworks show. Alright. So lights off. Variac up. Applying about 50 volts at this point. You can see the power lights on. Get the camera over here where you can see a little bit better. And hopefully here, whatever issues it may have. So at this point it's pretty quiet in the shop. Don't have dogs running around. Alright, so I'm up to about 95 volts. Pulling approximately ½ amp of current at idle. Volume control is all the way down. Now, one word of caution. You see these 6L6s? Those are metal case 6L6s. Sometimes you'll actually have high voltage on the skin of these things, and you won't know until you touch them. It'll knock you across the room. Here we go. Get a little Morse code out of her. Now, every time I hear that, I'm seeing some slight fluctuations of current. So we'll just tap around. Hear that guy ring, 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 ring. There it is. Oh yeah. Up. Hear that? There it is. That 6L6 right there has an issue, so we don't want to keep running it. Could damage the power supply. So I thought those 6L6s kind of looked out of place. I don't like to use those unless they're going like in a ham radio transmitter where you don't have direct contact with them, okay? We obviously have bad 6L6s. Now I'm not going to just pop in a new set, okay? We're going to pull the chassis out, give it an inspection. If everything looks cool, then I'll put in some new tubes and we'll retest. Alright, so I removed the 4 screws underneath, so the chassis is loose. One thing you got to be very careful of is the speaker cable, okay? Don't get all happy, yank this thing out and break your speaker cable. Would not be good. Alright, let's see what we got going here. Alright, so there is a new filter cap. It's been installed. Good sign. A lot of the resistors all look original. Somebody has recapped it in the preamp section too. So that's a good sign. Let me take a look at the tube sockets under magnifying glass. We'll pop in some new 6L6s and see if she still goes pop, pop, pop. Alright, so take a look at this. I'm removing these metal 6L6s, and you can see the keyway on that one is broke off. That's a dangerous situation, because if you get this thing in there wrong, Kerblammy, right? Another good reason to change them. We'll always give everything a really good inspection under the magnifying glass. Easiest way for me to spot cracks, cold solder joints, etc. And yeah, there's a few. I'll touch them up. There's a ground down here going to that main filter cap. Looks very questionable. So I'll clean that up. We'll pop in some new 6L6s and go from there. So here's the connection issues that I spotted right off the bat. Don't know if you can see, but this fuse holder, the rear terminal, that lead is cracked right around it, which could give you intermittent power. Okay. Then you got this cap down here going between the output tubes, and on this side I can see the wire wrapped through the hole, but I do not see any solder on that lead. I really can't move it, but I don't trust it either. But the major offender is right here. This big glob of grounds, right? And we got some old wire runners hanging out here. You can tell it's a very cold connection. That needs to be addressed because that's the main ground for the new filter cap. So you may be wondering about my comment of high voltage being on the case of this tube. But here's how it can happen. If you take a look at the tube data sheets, you'll see that pin 1, normally not used on the 6L6 metal case tube, is actually tied to the case of the tube. See it on the meter? As a shield, okay? So if you were building an amp, pin 1's normally not used, but there's an available lug that you could use, say, to land some resistors on or whatever you're doing in your amp, that automatically hooks this shield to whatever potential that you put on pin 1. So let's look inside this amp and see if they use that pin at all. So here's the two 6L6 sockets. This one to the left, it is used. I didn't think it was. So yes, there's a lead on pin 1. It loops over to this pin 1. And yes, these are just tied to ground. So they're using that shield connection. When we put in the glass tubes, that ground will serve no purpose on those two sockets. So I did a cleanup of the connections. I was not happy with how close the leads of that cap were to the other pins. So I put a little bit of heat shrink on there. The filter cap, I abandoned that old glob ground job and I gave it its own ground direct to the chassis. So let's get some tubes in it and see what it does. Okay, I've got our new tubes installed. Let's see if that sensitivity is gone. So I'm already hearing something. Let's get in here closer. So before, we had that sensitivity here on the output tube. You could hear that short kind of going boom. That appears to be gone, but I'm still hearing something. It's probably on these other input tubes. I got the volumes all the way down. Microphone's up just a little bit there. But there's still a little bit of noise. That tube appears to be a little sensitive. Ooh. They're like little microphones. You could probably talk in that and hear it. So it looks like we got something going on here. Not so much that guy, but these guys. A little microphonic. Definitely sensitive. Sounds like it's getting a little bit worse with time. It's typical. Here comes the lightning storm. But it's not the output tubes. Yeah, they are getting warm. Something going on over here. One of these two. Not connections. And then it settles down. Alright, I'm going to see if I can find these two tubes. We'll replace them and see if the problems go away. So I've had her cooking for a while. There is some slight little hiss in the background, which is to be expected for these vintage amps, okay? But the main violator for the big pops and squeals was this 6C5, which was in that position. So I found a quiet one. I'm going to let it sit here and cook, but I believe the EH150 is good to go. Alright, well, she's working. Sorry, can't play guitar, but it plays, it's clean. That is on the microphone input. The instrument inputs obviously have a lot less gain. I don't know what they had these things set up for instruments, but I really don't think it was modern guitars.